We are back with the death lineup, and we're running the three-man weave today. Ben Cruz said, hey, man, I want to talk some hoops. So, as always, he is invited to this show. Ben, what is up?
What's up, guys? I've been jonesing, man. Usually my days on the mic consist of just talking about wrestling, and I love it. Don't get me wrong. But, basketball is my one true love. Wrestling podcast, it's the mistress, You love them just the same, but there's always that piece of you that's longing for your one true love. So it's good. Thanks for having me back on, guys. And Brian already with the Valkyries gear. This is fantastic. He might be the first person in Bay Area media to have it on.
One on. Yeah.
Can we plant this flag for you?
Yeah, please.
All right, pull up the shirt just a little bit. I want to see what
look at this purple.
Like. Yeah,
it's just like a natural Nike tee.
Great logo, great colors. I think the whole thing is a giant win.
Yeah.
But Ben, this is where you gotta keep greasing the wheels with the boss and say, hey man, we need that Bay Area podcast. So I could be on it every once in a while.
This is it's my lifelong dream to bring that to the ringer.
Yeah.
So if any one of my bosses is listening, I'm in. Let me know.
What do they have so far? Is it just Boston and Philly? In terms
Boston,
of just like
Philly,
hometown pod?
New York, and
Chicago. New York,
Chicago. All East Coast, like just all East Coast, kind of Midwest, no West Coast.
That's where I understand. That's where my frustration is.
Yeah,
as so much in the West Coast.
Like,
you can't just do California, like you do, like, well, I guess Boston,
right?
Yeah, you'd have to do like Northern California or even specifically Bay Area, so you don't have to talk about the Kings or the A's soon.
Yeah, well, just they know I'm doing this. I'm asking. I'm just waiting, and when the call comes in, I'll be ready.
I mean, there's so many people out here, even like. Not even saying who could host it, but I'm just saying, as far as guests are concerned, the reporting is so excellent in the Bay Area that you just have consistently like banger guests. Though I think we might have to fix TK's Wi-Fi because every show now it's right at the end. He's like, oh, can't see you, can't hear you. Hopefully you're hearing me on this. I'm like, why are we keeping this in the pod? Like, let's cut this part out of it.
Right. Well, I guess this takes out my idea of just pitching a Fitz and Kalina pod. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later.
All right, so we're going to talk about a little bit about the finals, and the Western Conference Finals is still going right now. I think the game is going to start about a half an hour after we record. The Eastern Conference Finals, gosh, what a layup Boston has gotten so far. But hey, man, this is what happens when you're the number one seed by far. You get the lay of the land, and they were very fortunate in how this all worked out for them. And then Halliburton goes down, and this is, this series. We kind of talked about this in our group chat, but it's like the teams that the Warriors broke in 2022 are back for a vengeance in 2024. Like they beat the Mavs, and I think we kind of expected them to beat the Mavs because Luke is young. It's Luke and Brunson. They're still like kind of figuring things out. They had that great series win over the Suns when Luke is just like staring at Booker. But I think we thought, okay, the veterans that the Warriors have, they've been here before. They should be able to win this series. Luka was amazing that series, but the Warriors did win. Was it in 5, right? Was it in 5?
Yeah, it was quick.
And then Boston, sort of the same thing happened. Like the Warriors eventually figured them out. I know people will say in Boston that Tatum was hurt, but that's all part of the equation. And the Warriors figured them out, beat them in 6, and we got that last championship. And that's why I kind of like this finals. I don't think it's going to do gangbusters as far as the attention span of the population of people who watch basketball. I think for hardcore basketball fans, it's going to be a great series, but it just shows you how hard the NBA playoffs are, where you kind of have to like get through it a couple times before you can figure things out. And now Boston seemingly has been there almost, every year since Jason Tatum has come into the league. So, they could take it, but then you got Luka. You're like, okay, Luka had that experience in 2022. They rebuilt the engine for him. Kyrie has a championship. So it may not be even. I don't know if Boston and Dallas is even, but it's probably a lot closer than I would have thought before the playoffs started. And then watch, Minnesota come in and just steal these next 3 games and make what I said, not non-existent. But are you guys looking forward to the finals? Like, it's not sexy, but I still think it's an interesting series there. If it is Boston and Dallas, and Ben, you can go first.
Well, I think the fact that Boston's already involved increases the interest levels, times 5, if you will, because if they win, then they're the most winningest franchise in history, right? And I think the intrigue with the Mavs, could they get their second one when, what are they, the 5th seed right now? It's a pretty low seed to be, NBA champion.
Yeah.
We're talking, Rockets in the, mid 90s being the 6th seed and kind of pulling this thing out. And I think in terms of looking at the matchup, you mentioned kind of, this is the 2022 teams who had their hearts broken by the Warriors and who had honestly developed their playoff scars in that playoff run, right? With the Mavs, just as they were constructed, they just weren't ready for it, right? Like, yes, on paper, we're going to look back and we're going to say, oh, Jalen Brunson was on the team. That's wild.
Yeah.
But it wasn't this Jalen Brunson, right? This was the Jalen Brunson. This is Jalen Brunson 1.0. Right. And now we obviously have the more fully formed Jalen Brunson, who we all look at as, a superstar. But Luka needed to kind of take that beating, right? He needed to get dunked on by Andrew Wiggins to have that chip on his shoulder to kind of be this dude now who's taking step back threes on the defensive player of the year and Rudy Gobert and just yelling God knows what into his face, right? And just talking mad shit at Anthony Edwards, right? So we can't say that was early for Luka, So that was probably where Anthony Edwards was now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not
good point.
I don't think it's a one-to-one comparison in terms of their ages. I think Luka was a little bit older, but the playoff scars thing I think is very, very important. And this is going to benefit the Timberwolves in the long run, right? They've lost, I think they lost the first 3 games by combined like 13 points or something like that. And obviously a couple of possessions swing.
Yep.
Maybe they're actually up in this series, but again, you got to take these lumps and this is just going to benefit them in the long run. And then in terms of the Celtics, I mean, the Warriors connection for me with them was just this narrative of that they've had an easy path to the finals, right? Because that narrative, if you look at the Warriors' 4 championships in the last couple of years here, that was kind of always the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was because they were a super team, because they had the Hamptons 5 and Durant and everything else, or the injury luck. The first championship, right? Let's go back to 2015. That narrative was floating around, right? Oh, if Kyrie doesn't hurt his knee, it really hurt in game 1 of the 2015 finals. Does that, does their championship run happen? And it's everyone, whenever they bring this up, is this the easy path to the? It's a great first take topic, because it's a great casual conversation that you can have with someone when you just kind of look at surface level numbers. But at the end of the day, you got to play who's in front of you. It's actually such an old narrative and a tired narrative where what were the Celtics supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like take out Jaylen Brown and not have him play to make it more quote unquote fair. It's
if you're a Celtics fan, you go, we much like it better this year than last year when, what does Bill call them? The zombie heat or whatever.
Zombie heat,
just not having to deal with that and being the disappointment on that side. I'm sure they much better like it. You don't have to apologize for that. But Bri, I think people think that the Warriors, the beginning of their championship run, just kind of came out of the blue. It did not. They beat Denver. They upset Denver in the first round of the playoffs 2 years before the title. And then they lost to San Antonio. And those San Antonio games were very much like the Warriors beating Boston. You're watching these going like, oh my gosh, we are much closer to these guys than we even expected. And then that vet and savviness, that guile, then they pulled away. Warriors are hurting by the end of that series. They'd never been there before. They took their lumps in that weird Clippers series the next year. And then they took off. So they also had 3 playoff series before that first run where they actually got all of those reps in. So, Bri, as a basketball fan, what is your interest level in Mavs Celtics if that is the finals?
on a scale of last year, like I think this is miles and miles more
Way better,
entertaining.
right?
Way better. Like I think last year, everyone. I mean, maybe you can make a case for the Heat because, like, oh, we don't want to pick against the Heat because they've been proving us wrong every single round. But I think everyone in the back of their mind knew that Denver was going to win. Heat went to 7, so they were tired. They should have been done in 4, but they went to 7 and kind of screwed themselves over. Maybe if they went in 4 or 5, it might have been closer. But I think everyone kind of thought Denver was going to win that one. And let's hope Minnesota. I kind of hope Minnesota puts up a little bit of a fight, but I don't want them to completely tire out Dallas and do what Boston did to Miami last year and take them to 7, because then you could just write in Boston's name for a championship.
Right.
If Dallas goes to 7 and then they have to go play Boston in the finals, like it's already over. I'm kind of hoping that Dallas gets it done in 5. Even though I picked the Timberwolves, I think I kind of went against my own advice there, which is like, you need that, what the Warriors did, those 2 playoff runs before the championship. Like Minnesota kind of has that, but in the sense of like, it was first round they lost in the first round against Jaws, Memphis Grizzlies. The next year they lost in the first round against Denver, and then they make a jump to the conference finals. Like I still think they needed that one more year. Whereas Dallas, like there is some similarity with the Luka and Ant, not necessarily skill set, but like progression in the sense of the playoffs. Like, in 2 years we might be seeing Ant in the finals. Kind of how we knocked the Mavs out in the Western Conference Finals, and then they're about to knock out the Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals, and T-Wolves might be back here in 2 years. But
no, sorry, I was just gonna say, a question I have for you guys in terms of the Celtics is that, and I know it's we're this easiest path narrative, and you might as well pencil in that the Celtics win the title if this goes to 7. For the sake of basketball narratives and conversations, I would almost the Celtics just win this thing handedly. That way we can have a proper conversation around how good Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are. Because I think the conversations around them have become, I get it. They've, they haven't won anything yet, but the conversations around them have gotten almost so toxic to the point where like, I almost refuse to engage in certain ones, like when out in the wild, out in public with the people who don't talk about this stuff on the regular, because these guys are incredible. These guys are incredible basketball players, right? I get it. Jaylen is the highest paid player in the NBA right now. And that probably doesn't add up in terms of what he's achieved and who he is as a player. Tatum gets shit on relentlessly.
Yep.
Right. He's like, he's the Ruffles guy. He's on Ruffles bags all day, but he hasn't won anything. Again, this is the dude who dunked on LeBron James in the Eastern Conference Finals his rookie season and had his team on the brink of facing the Warriors in his rookie season. Right. And that's when he was beloved. Everyone couldn't get enough of this dude. And now here we are, 6-7 years later, whatever it is now. And the narrative around him, there's that commercial of him saying like, oh, I'm not that Jason Tatum or whatever it is. And people are like really running with that. And let's be real. Like these two dudes are awesome. They're awesome at basketball. And I think, I get it. It's part of this take culture now where it's like, you build them up to take them down.
Yes.
And we're taking them down now before they even get there. But if they win a championship, it kind of becomes undeniable until you do it again, as my guy Waz would say, right? You have to do it a second time. But, it kind of felt like that with Jokic, and then he won a title. And, that was quieted for a bit. Obviously now those conversations have been reinvigorated by the fact that they got eliminated in round 2. But I almost just kind of want the Celtics to just walk away with this so we can just kind of recalibrate the way we talk about Tatum and Brown.
It's a great point. I wonder though, if you get a 4-game sweep of Celtics over the Wolves or the Mavs,
sure,
how many people are going to go back to, oh, they had such an easy run through this thing? I almost wonder if it's better for them to win the title with some adversity where they do have to kind of, gut it out, and Jason Tatum can show that, okay, I am this guy. People think I'm soft or whatever, but no, I'm actually this guy. I mean, Brian and I had this conversation during the 2022 finals. Is like, Jaylen Brown is actually way better than I realized. Now, the ball handling, right? The ball handling is still not there for whatever reason, but I mean, we see it with Clay. Like we've hoped that Clay would improve his handle for years and years and years, and it didn't happen. But Jaylen Brown, he's so tough. He's so physically tough, mentally tough. Like you watch his emotion, and we were just like, this dude is a dog. We wished him to be on the Warriors at some point. Like that's how impressed we were with him.
Yeah.
And you know, Tatum always sort of comes across a little bit as like the little brother or like the baby puppy, where Jaylen Brown kind of shields him from stuff. But I do think it's time for Tatum to kind of take this thing and, like you said, you know, and really run with it, because if he doesn't, then that's just another summer of this stuff. And for him, I'm sure it wouldn't be great. But for also, it probably make work for you a little bit better if Boston runs through this thing.
You think? I don't know. I don't know if we have a Celtics view at the Ringer. Let me double check that. It might be in the handbook.
Well, what if Minnesota takes this to 5? Let's say they take it to 6, or you know, maybe it is over in 5. What if Boston loses the finals? Like, what's the narrative there? Like, we're just talking about, you know, easy win for them. We've kind of all just made like the assumption that they're gonna win. But what if they lose? Because they've historically, like, you know, maybe they weren't ready against the Warriors, but then the Heat thing, you know, they go down 3-0 against the Heat. Like, they've kind of historically, with this 2J's core, not been ready, or when it's been the biggest moment for them, they haven't, you know, showed up. And that is kind of like the take culture in the TV shows with Stephen A. Smith and stuff. But I mean, there is a world where they still lose this thing.
Oh, 1,000%. And I think, you know, the piece that obviously has been missing this entire playoff run has been Porzingis, right?
Oh,
and I think once he comes back, that kind of balances the scales a little bit, where, again, Brown and Tatum probably don't have to be as good as they have been, right? Like, especially Jaylen Brown, he was fantastic in the Eastern Conference Finals. Again, to your point, Double G, just making big play after big play, right? You know, that corner 3 that he hit to just kind of, you know, put them over in that Pacers series. Again, the dude's just nails.
Yeah,
right? He just kind of gets it. Porzingis is this. I feel like this chess piece that they just haven't been able to deploy, right? Because they've been slow playing it to the point where, again, it feels like, again, I'm going to throw in a wrestling reference here, where it's just like, again, this dude's music is going to hit, and all of a sudden everyone's going to act surprised, where we don't know what this dude brings to the table when we absolutely know what he does. And this is his destiny, to kind of be a third, you know, the third best player on a team like this. And I think once they unlock that, and once they actually let that go, it's going to be unreal. But to your point, Brian, if they lose, oh boy, the field day that's going to be had on Twitter on these takey shows is going to be, it might be historic, honestly, because the narrative flip of Luka, who is really people look down on him a little. I'll say it nicely, because, you know, how he talks to the refs, the amount that he talks to the refs, the complaining, the Kyrie narrative from a couple years ago. We don't got to get into all that, but, like, you know, it was there.
Bad.
And then now, again, everyone's that narrative slowly starting to turn a little bit. If they dethrone, and this is, again, big assumption that they're going to just close out the Timberwolves in the next couple of games here. If they dethrone the Celtics, or just take down the Celtics in the finals, it might be some special narratives happening on Twitter that I'm both excited and horrified to see what, you know, comes to fruition.
I watched the Cleveland series against the Celtics, and my main takeaway was, why aren't they just putting Horford in a pick and roll like every single play?
Yeah.
And this is what the Warriors did. If you remember, some of the tricks of the trade was getting Horford, for a late 30-year-old man, or I don't know if he's 40, this dude still plays his ass off.
Yeah.
But when you look at what the deficiencies are, if you were to attack him with guards, that should be a way for you to, you know, to get great looks and to play off of those looks. And so I was talking to somebody, Celtics fan, and I was like, okay, so what is your team's chess piece to, if the other team goes small and just gets Horford involved in everything? And he said, it's Porzingis. And I was like, oh yeah, because, you know, Porzingis got hurt. And I was like, that's the chess piece, is having Porzingis there. So if Luka decides, because that Luka's very strategic in who he goes after and who he gets involved in stuff. And you go, yeah, Luka and Horford, oh, that could be tough. And then you go, oh, wait, they got Porzingis and Horford's only got to play 20 minutes. And then Porzingis plays 27 minutes. And then you kind of have that situation resolved. But I still want to see that team just go uber small and attack the five, because if I'm playing that team, I go, oh, let's get Horford off the court and bring in random white guy on your bench. You pick whomever.
Wait, the Celtics have white guys on their team? Is that true?
Coonrod or does Peyton even get in the game? I don't even know.
Pritchard gets some burn, yeah.
And so like get their bench involved if you have to pull Horford. But then if Porzingis is healthy, then that is the chess piece, and that's what makes it compelling. I think is if you have the Mavs, like let's say the Mavs wrap it up, and again, if Minnesota comes back and wins these next 3 games, like all of what we just said is not going to hold up well. But they're up 3-1. They should close out. If they don't, then that is the story. But you have a Dallas team that when will the finals start? Like next Friday or next
June
Thursday?
6th? Yeah.
So we see Luka hobbling up and down like in the first round of the playoffs. I wasn't sure this dude was going to get through the first round, and he's still playing. You have Lively, who just got hurt. Now, crossing fingers, I think he's playing tonight. Active tonight.
Yeah, he's playing tonight.
But let's get both of these teams just healthy as all hell and go at it. That's what I want to see. I want to see healthy Celtics, healthy Mavs. If they knock out the Timberwolves, they got a full week to prepare, and the Celtics got a whole week to kind of get healthy and make sure everything is good. That's the series that I want to see. No excuses. Everybody's healthy. Let's go and let's see, see who the real best team is. Now, hey, this is an interesting one, and we'll get off of this, and we'll get to some other topics. But in the, a lot of times the finals is a coaching decision here, a tweak here. Oh yeah, Andrew Bogut, you're gonna go and guard the other team's 2 guard who can't actually shoot.
Yeah.
Andre Iguodala is actually going to start instead of come off. Like there's these little tweaks that can kind of rev the engine of the team. Who are you more convinced will be able to make that kind of move out of these 2 coaches? Jason Kidd, Maz, man. Like what's who's the person who's going to be like, that's the coaching move that wins the series? I think it's kind of a toss-up, right? Kidd has been actually, I think, pretty good with his lineups. I've been impressed, but it's not like he's been coaching for a long time and nobody ever said, yeah, Jason Kidd's just like this ultimate strategic guy. He's more of like he understands how these guys play and what makes them tick. I mean, he was the LeBron babysitter in like the 2012 Olympics. Like that's how much they trusted him, like as a people person. So I just wonder that point of it. It's like neither guy is really known to be this like strategic there's no Spoelstra, there's no Pop, right. That kind of coach who's going to make a big difference from what it seems like.
I mean, if you had to choose, again, this is all based off of narrative now. Recently, the Jason Kidd narrative has been fantastic, right? Like he's been lauded now specifically. Before his Mavericks tenure, he was looked at as that dude who intentionally tried to spill a drink on the sideline for a timeout, right? Like, that was his reputation. He was the guy who couldn't get along with Giannis in Milwaukee, right? Who just kind of fostered this toxic environment over there. And now he's viewed as this tactician who's really deployed this defense with the Mavs that is almost surprising to a point, right? Like we knew that they could probably create offense with 2 guys like Luka and Kyrie, but the defense that they've been able to deploy has been, it's been eye-opening, right? And it's made people look at Jason Kidd in a little bit of a different light. And on the Joe Maz front, and look, I will be completely open with this. This might be just for me listening to Bill talk about him a lot. And the confidence that Bill has in Joe Maz, you can listen to him, not that high.
Not that high at all.
And I think it's because I forgot where. Joe Maz. So look, Joe Maz, big fan of The Town, right? That came out in a GQ article.
Oh, the movie, the Ben Affleck
movie. Yeah. Excellent movie, excellent Boston-based movie for Joe Maz. And I think it's just the group chat guys mentioned he's just kind of a weird dude, right? And I think that's why people aren't really ready to buy into him. Also, again, he inherited this team, right? This wasn't necessarily like he was obviously brought in under unideal circumstances, and he kind of had to learn quickly on the job. And honestly, I think it's more of a situation where people just don't really know him, right? As a figure, as a person, and you kind of make these judgments on him based on his basketball acumen, and which is completely fair. I just don't know if do we have enough of a sample size? Maybe we do, but if you had to choose, I mean, Brian, I'm curious your thought. It has to be Kid, right? So. And I'm not trying to have any Bay Area based bias here. Obviously he grew up out here, went to Cal, everything else, but it seems like he would have the edge. If you had to choose the tail of the tape, coaches are on the graphic, Jason Kidd might be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm purely going off of I guess looking at Maz 2 years ago against the Warriors. Did he make any adjustments that we were totally aware of in that final series? I can't personally remember
he wasn't,
too many.
He wasn't even he was an assistant.
Oh, it was Ime. You're right. Ime was the coach.
Ime.
So I feel what I was gonna say is that I feel like Maz might have gotten a little bit of kind of what Kerr gets criticized of just being kind of handed a championship ready team. So I think there's still stuff to be seen and to be proven on his side. And I mean, I think it's tough to sometimes I don't really totally know how well a coach is, outside of their winning record. I feel like, I come to the conclusion if they're good or not based on their winning record, which I know isn't completely the right way to do it. It's the halftime adjustments. It's the plays. It's the, game to game adjustments. It's how you control a locker room. It's how you can keep your players, motivated. But I mean, you just look at it from on paper, the Mavs are a 5 seed in a very tough Western Conference, and they knocked out the Clippers, sure, without Kawhi. They went and knocked out the number 1 seed, and now they're about to knock out a team who I picked to defeat them. So I think they've been defying the odds. I think that they've even the idea of getting 2 key acquisitions at the deadline and having to integrate them into your style, into your roster. I think that kudos to them and Kid for being able to do that as well. So I'm going to give him
two who were, by the way, when those trades happened, nobody was really giving credit to the Dallas Mavericks front office, right? No one. They were like, Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. What are these guys doing? These guys are losers. And now look at them. They're like,
I almost think
these guys might be the key.
Right. I almost think that I'm trying to remember the narrative of I think during their pick sent to the Knicks for Kristaps, they did some protection thing where it just kept conveying and kept going to the next year, going to the next year. Yeah. So they weren't able to send a trade because of that. And I think they finally sent that, but they were finally able to do something with that pick. And then they sent it to the Hornets. We're like, God, now we have to do this again. But it sounds like this one's, working out. I don't remember my take on it at the time, but hell, I wish the Warriors did something like that. Right.
It went from, are these moves really going to mean anything? And it turned into, maybe every team should attack teams by just having long, stretchy guys who can run the court. But Luka being just throws these just fantastic lobs where you don't even see it coming, but you have to have guys like that to catch those lobs.
Yep.
And to finish them, right? Imagine Luka, playing for the Warriors, he'd just be like, where's Trace Jackson Davis? How come he's not on the court?
Trace Jackson Davis would be an all-star.
Who else can I throw a lob to? Yeah. It's so I think it was one of those moves where it's I wonder if this is the zag, in the thing right now. But all right, one other thing before we talk about the Warrior stuff, and I just wanted to bring it up because in my fandom of basketball, and this is why I wanted to talk about it, because I think I'm maybe 12 or 13 years older than you, Ben, and you're 12 years older than Brian. So we have these interesting times in which we remember things in basketball, and somebody passed away recently in Bill Walton.
Yeah.
And when I'm growing up, I know Bill Walton because I'm watching ESPN all the time. And one thing ESPN used to play were these like old college, like the March Madness videos. So from 1972, and you just see like the whole tournament. And so I knew Bill Walton from those kind of videos. And so then, as my basketball acumen is growing, and I remember this guy, Bill Walton, and I'm like, okay, well, where is he in the league? Like, there's no way that he's not a big time player in the league. And then I learned that he's just essentially been hurt for the longest time. And then he's traded to the Celtics, and he's kind of already over the hill just because of 70s and 80s basketball and training and health and stuff wasn't the same. But then to see him on that Boston team, it's like, oh, that's the guy who I would see on these videos at UCLA. And then he became kind of like more of an announcer to me than really I knew him as a player. And I remember Tom Tolbert, when Tom Tolbert did the finals on
ABC games. Yeah.
It was him and Walton, and I forget who the play-by-play man was. But then Walton becomes like this very interesting guy to interview. He's a great quote. He's randomly going off on these tangents all the time. He becomes very entertaining. So there's this time frame when Bill Simmons, and going back to Bill Simmons, he writes his basketball book. He just mentioned this on his podcast, where in the epilogue of that book, he goes and he travels to meet Bill Walton. Now, I would have to go back and reread the chapter, but in my memory, like, Bill Walton could not go back in time to when he won the title with Portland, because those memories were so negative with how his foot thing, they win the title, his foot gets messed up. He tries to come back. It just gets more messed up. And he literally asks out of Portland, and they trade him to the San Diego at that time, the San Diego Clippers. And so I just remember in that book going like, oh man, like, this guy can't even relive the highest highs of his NBA career. And then, but he speaks glowingly about when he came back and was talking about Larry.
Sure.
So where does your memory of Bill Walton, like, where does that story of him? And then I want to ask Brian too, because Brian would have never even sniffed seeing him play. But like, where would you first remember him from?
Mine is definitely as an announcer. Throw it down, big man, is just that defined that NBC or NBA on NBC era, right? It was just a lot of Bill Walton. And obviously as I got older, you kind of learn more of the backstory of where he was, where he came from as a player and everything else. But honestly, that's my core memory in terms of being just a basketball fan, just him as an announcer. And then it evolved eventually into him being Luke Walton's dad, right? I kind of caught that weird middle, or I have no recollection at all of him playing, right? Just because of when I was born. But then he became Luke Walton's dad. And then so I'm in that era of it. And again, it's just the way that his passing, and may he rest in peace, just like has affected a lot of us as basketball fans, is because he's almost the soundtrack to how we became or why we love basketball, right? It's going to be the same thing when Jim Ross, knock on wood, passes away. It's going to be that same thing, right? When you're like, oh, he's obviously he wasn't on the court or in the ring, but he's the sounds that I hear if you were to play certain footage without sound, right? Can you hear this picture? And a lot of it is going to be Bill Walton's voice. And I think that's going to be, a big lasting memory. I'm jealous, honestly, of the people who've gotten to see who were able to see him play, and then kind of all through these different eras. And some of us will have that eventually, like with like the Barkleys and the Shaqs of the world, right? As they get older. But Bill Walton is just obviously he had a let's just say a relationship with marijuana, and I think that informs of how a lot of us see him in like a glowing way, in actually a good light, right? Where he didn't take himself too seriously. He was always inviting. Logan Murdoch with The Ringer told a great story about how when he was an up and coming reporter, and he needed to write a story for about the Pac-12 tournament, Bill Walton just brought him to a room, talked to him for 30 minutes. Right. He was just always so welcoming and was looking to grow the game and wasn't one of those, greats or those old professional athletes who were stuck in the past, right? They were just all about living in the present.
Yep.
And kind of building the future. And not everyone can do that. Not everyone has the mindset to want to do that, honestly, because you get, you hear all these athletes talk all the time, and some of them are just stuck in that period of their greatness, and they live in that world, and they choose to live in that world. Bill Walton just he constantly evolved, right? Which is why, I think his passing affected so many of us.
Yeah.
Right? From everyone who saw him play to everyone who didn't see him play, because he was just that effective as a broadcaster and as a player as well.
So, Bri, you're even younger, so I can't even imagine what your relationship with Bill Walton is, even if you do have one.
Yeah, I was about to say my generation's cooked, and I don't want to speak for my entire generation on the knowledge of Bill Walton, but I think as someone who's like maybe their institutional knowledge of the NBA maybe starts when Michael Jordan was drafted, and I didn't get to watch like Mike play or anything, but I feel like that's kind of where my understanding of the league to now kind of maybe starts, because I did my research. I didn't do as much research prior to then. Bill Walton, go further back, Russell, Chamberlain, even like Rick Barry. Like I think I watched one game of that final series and was like, this is just boring.
It's different, right? It's so different.
Rough, bro.
But yeah, but I think my knowledge of Bill Walton honestly is just a 2K legend. I could already picture the My Team card with him on the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah.
I've used that card, and then also like Ben said a little bit, Luke Walton's dad. Luke went to my school, U of A, and so I've seen. I don't know if I ever saw Bill Walton there when I was there, but I know he announced games. Was he a Pac-12 announcer, or did he specifically do U of A stuff?
No, he did Pac-12 stuff.
Pac-12.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, how I remember him is I think, when he passed, the amount of flooding on my timeline that was just a guy who's smiling all the time has kind of, impacted my image of him, that it just seemed like he was always a positive guy. Even TK's message on the Warriors Plus Minus show, where TK was like sharing his relationship with Walton, and it feels so intimate, but you can imagine that he has so many of these intimate relationships that we perceive as intimate, but to him is maybe not to diminish the relationship, but he probably has so many of those. And TK was saying like he waited for him at an airport to take TK somewhere. Like he just was a guy like that who was always willing to, take time out of his day to help others. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I would say if you want to learn about him, there's a good ESPN 30 for 30 that came out. I think it was last year. It came out, maybe the year before. It's like a 4-parter. It's really good. But the best one is just the David Halberstam book, Breaks of the Game. That book is so eye-opening, especially because if you think about the time frame of just a reporter hanging out in the locker room saying, I'm covering this team, and here, okay, yeah, we'll give you access. Like it could never happen today. Like, no, just all the intimate details he had of that team, that Blazers team. That book, I think, would give you a really, really good portrayal of not only of Bill and his teammates, but of the era of the NBA, because it's right before, it's 2 years before Magic and Larry get drafted. So interesting time frame, because the 70s era of the NBA is not covered very well, and it's really hard to find a lot of stuff. Like I've been trying to find just different books and stuff about that era, because it's not an era that I know very well. So that book though is probably the best one. All right, let's talk about the Warriors here, and I had 2 things to ask you guys. I told you beforehand, so it's not like this is going to
don't break kayfabe. No, you didn't.
Any surprise? I mean, I would be a really bad co-host here if I just like sprung all of these things on you guys. But we had 2 questions about the Warriors offseason. And there's an article that Anthony Slater came out with today where he wrote a little bit about Klay, and how Klay coming back to the Warriors might not be a slam dunk, and it's very possible because of the amount of suitors that he may have, that he will leave. It sounds like the Warriors are being pretty utilizing their leverage, let's say, in rather than just bringing him back for what he wants. And I imagine some of it is because they're like, dude, we paid you so much money and you got hurt. Like, it's not, that was the hometown, friendly deal for you. So the idea that Clay may not be back with the team is part of Slater's piece. Then he talked a little bit about the coaching staff, because I think they believe that Kenny Atkinson may be gone. He may be picked up for a head coaching position. And then at the end, there was a little bit about some free agency stuff. But so these questions are related to Clay and then about free agency. So let's do the free agency one first. So my question to you, and we'll let Ben go first as the guest. Which player who's either going to be a free agent or is rumored to be in trades would you like to see the Warriors make a real attempt? And when I say real attempt, we're talking about putting all the chips on the table. We're talking about Kuminga. We're talking about picks. We're talking about utilizing CP in a trade. So, this is, who would you want to see them? Now, I caveated this by saying, LeBron and KD more than likely not going anywhere. But like, who's realistic? And out of the realistic guys, who would you want to see the Warriors make like that real, Shohei, maybe not Shohei Ohtani kind of effort, but who are they laying out the red carpet to go try and get?
So, I've heard a lot of Jarrett Allen, which, it makes sense. Rim protector, a lob threat and everything else. He's gettable, right? In terms of contract wise, it's a little bit, it's easier to match up that contract to actually facilitate a deal. And he does fill a need, right? Like, again, they just didn't have anyone like that. Trace Jackson Davis to an extent, but man, when you shot this question over, the first guy that came to mind was Lauri Markkanen. And look, I know defensively there's things to be desired, right? Not exactly a rim protector. He's a big dude, but I think he's the type of dude where, because I'm imagining this as who can play next to Draymond, right? Yep. And Jarrett Allen can play next to Draymond. But then on the offensive end, you're really sacrificing a lot of shooting, right? You're basically, your 4 and 5 are negatives in terms of, can they spread the floor, right? And this is assuming Klay Thompson comes back, which I'm sure we'll get to. But to have, we've seen what this current Warriors iteration looks like when they have 2 non-shooters on the floor. It's not great. It used to be great, not so much anymore. So the Lowry piece is where, again, this is a dude who shot damn near 40% from 3 last year. He's a big body, right? And I think that's one of the things that the Warriors also need to address is their lack of size, right? And again, I think, his lack of defensive acumen is obviously alarming, but Draymond, I think, more than makes up for that, right? And obviously this dude was playing in Utah where they had no, they weren't exactly trying to raise the floor over there, right? And reach their ceiling. So to have him slide next to Draymond as that stretch 5, I think you could make some stuff happen. The floor opens up significantly, and Draymond can cover up a lot of his defensive deficiencies. So Lowry is, and again, his contract also isn't as, obviously, look, they have this team's luxury tax situation is completely unideal, but I think he's got like 1 year, 18 million left on his deal. I think that's palatable, right? In this current landscape of where the Warriors are. So he would be my first pick before a Jarrett Allen situation. That's probably more likely, just because the Cavs are probably more motivated to move him since they have an Evan Mobley to move to the 5. But Lowry, I think, would be the ideal fit for the Warriors.
And you're not worried about Danny Ainge swindling Mike Dunleavy on this deal?
Look, there's only so many things we can control. we gotta trust the Dookie, man. We gotta trust Mike Dunleavy that he owes us for all those years as being the 3rd pick and just being a mediocre NBA player.
So I like it. No, I mean that he is a young player. Brian has been on this thing about they need a number 2, and he would be their number 2. He would be their number 2 scorer.
Former All-Star.
One-time
All-Star.
All right, Bri, what about you?
I mean, when you take out the home run candidates out of the equation, I feel like it just makes it, I actually have to do my work here. But like, there's You think about some of the players they've mentioned thus far, and I think they even said it on the Plus Minus podcast, so I'm kind of regurgitating their take, but it makes sense in the sense of like Brandon Ingram, even to an extent, Zach LaVine. Let's even throw like a Julius Randle on the table. Let's even throw a Jimmy Butler on the table. What do those players?
Can I throw the Julius Randle one back at your face?
Yeah. I'll retract it. I'll retract.
Do you remember when that one draft when they were coming up with all of these little nicknames for trying to tank for these players, and I think Jalen Rose came up with mishandle for Randall.
Yeah,
because he was a highly coveted. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say the common thing with all those players that are potential gets for us is that their teams are not looking to get worse. The Pelicans want to add to get better. The Knicks, of course, we just saw them almost in the Eastern Conference Finals. Had it been for a few injuries, they would have been there. They want to get better. Miami, they would love to get better. I forgot the other player I said, but it's just tough when the packages we'd want to give them is okay, expiring contract that you could maybe just buy out to get off of that deal on CP, and then Kuminga, who's not ready to give you everything next year, but in 3 years he might be a big player for you, and then picks. So what team would kind of want that? And I know Utah is a candidate, but I'm kind of looking at I'm waiting for some of those teams that there's going to be some blow it up teams, and I think Atlanta is probably going to be one of them. Could Brooklyn be one of them? Even though they technically are the definition of try to win it all team because they don't have their own picks, so there's no reason to tank. But hell, I don't see a way for them to win. But what are some other teams that are going to try and blow it up? And I think that's the stars I want to target. And I guess for Atlanta, we can go back to the DeJounte thing of that we were at the trade deadline. I think I don't know if it's a topic. I apologize for not looking at the itinerary, but a topic for what can we pull from some of these playoff teams, implement into our team that'll make us a lot better, right? But you look at Dallas, a team that, did take a 3-1 season record over us, but I felt like we were more competitive against them than, say, Minnesota if we were given another chance. They have 2 bona fide scorers who can get a bucket without a doubt, and then they kind of surround them with defenders who are lengthy, lob threats with Derek Jones, PJ, and Lively / Gafford. Could we have just another bona fide bucket next to Steph and just try to get more athletic along the edges? And, I guess giving up Kuminga would kind of be redundant because he is an athletic guy, but we need them to be able to shoot a 3 too. So, as long as one of these guys is a bona fide bucket, I think that's only good. That's good for us. I know that there was the Jared Allen, can you see? I don't even know how the money would work. Do you get Zach LaVine then? Because ideally Zach LaVine is probably the easiest get because he's got the worst contract and he's the worst out of the bunch. So that wouldn't be the toughest player to try and get. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just kind of the theme that I feel like Dallas's offense with our offense specifically is more replicable than to what Minnesota is, than to what Boston is. I actually think we can do something that Dallas has done. Because we have Luka, we have, or whichever one you want it, So we just need the number 2, with a little, of course, some more.
Okay, so did you pick a guy? Did you pick a single one?
Short term DeJounte. That I think my answer is going to change every week. I'm going DeJounte right now.
Okay, I'm picking a guy. This is just me staying consistent. I'm picking a guy that I think I heard Ben groan about just a little while ago. But there's a method to my madness here. If you can just exchange, if you just say, okay, we're going to take out Kuminga and the things that Kuminga does well, and we're going to just insert Brandon Ingram, and you don't have to worry about money. We're not worried about that. We're just worried about we're just substituting those players. Do the Warriors get better? I think they do, for the reason why that Brian has been talking about all season, is because you just need somebody who can score the basketball consistently. I love a lot of the things that Kuminga does, and I do think he energizes the team both positively and negatively, and they're an old team, so you kind of need that athleticism. But if I look at the next 2 years of Steph's career, I'm not sure Steph is going to be a run and gun kind of guy. I think he may even play slightly better in a sort of slowed down offense a little bit. But they can't do that because they don't have bona fide professional scorers on their team. They have these quirky guys who got to do a lot of different things. Our guy Pods, Brian and I talked about this last week. We need to whomever Steph's guy who he goes to and just does all the training with, Brandon, was it Brandon Payne? What was that guy's name?
Yeah.
Like, that should be Pods' best friend, right? Like, give Pods a lot of new skills coming in, because the problem is that he just can't create his own shot, and he's gonna score on just how hard he plays. But if you can get somebody who can score and even do it a little bit in that mid-range, I just think you're really accentuating the next 2 or 3 years of Steph's career. Now, there's a problem. There's a flip side to Brandon Ingram. Kind of engine does this guy have? The health thing. Is he inspired to play great basketball? Like when he was with the Lakers, we got to see him a lot. He did not play very well in this playoff. So some of that is also the idea that the Warriors have a great nucleus and a foundation to basically take a guy who has all of the athletic skill sets and everything that you want in a player and make him better. Steve Kerr may already not like him, and if Slater's report is correct, that may be part of why they wouldn't even think about bringing him on. But
I think, doesn't that come from his time with Team USA last year in the World Championships? Like, this dude couldn't get off the bench, right? They had him slotted in as a starter.
He was supposed to be like their number one scorer.
Right.
Like,
they had him in as option 1 over Anthony Edwards. And one practice in, Kerr was like, oh, my bad. Let me switch this real quick. And they couldn't get Ingram off the bench. Right. He was sitting there as they lost the bronze medal game. It was wild.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And my calculus would be, he's got the tools. He just doesn't have the toolbox, and you have the toolbox with Draymond and Steph. Like, imagine going into practice and having that guy on your butt the whole time. And you know, Steph does it a different way, but he's still kind of on your butt because you don't want to disappoint him. Like, you don't want to, Steph's like the what does Sam Esfandiari call it? The immigrant dad. Like, you just can't disappoint him, because he has so much so much prestige in him as a human. So that's my reasoning. But at the same time, there's flaws in everybody that they probably have a realistic shot at, but I think the final sort of salute, or the thought that we all have, is they do need to do something. They can't run this same team back out next year and expect to be better.
Well, I think the thing that brings credence to your argument for Ingram is that, does it become the new Andrew Wiggins, right? Where obviously the current version of Wiggins is it's run its course. Let's just put it nicely. But when Wiggins was traded to the Warriors, that was kind of the same vibe and narrative around him, right? I've said narrative like 9 times on this podcast, but
you and Steph, man, that's Steph's favorite word also.
I know. Yeah. It's my word of the day on my toilet paper, but it's, if Ingram comes here and kind of gets that shot of life with the Warriors that a lot of guys who come here say they get, right? Where Wiggins got it, Dante DiVincenzo got it, right? Where you're like, oh, this is a winning culture, and it's just very different. And look, Ingram's deal is for what 1 year? I know it's a big number. It's like $36 million, but it's only 1 year. Do you take that 1 year and you maximize what you can out of Brandon Ingram, Andrew Wiggins-ify him? And I don't know, is that player a 1B? You could be right. But again, I have a lot of questions about if he even enjoys basketball as a sport. Is he just one of these dudes who's been tall all his life and was told you should play basketball, and now he just happens to be doing it at the highest level, and he doesn't have that drive? I don't know. That was the thing with Wiggins, right? So yeah. I think that's the hope, is that if you are able to pull this off.
And the other thought is just like the environment, the expectation, putting him in that winning expectation environment, that did help Wiggins a lot. And then he got paid, and I know he's had stuff outside of basketball that
Sure.
he's had to deal
Sure.
with as well. We don't know exactly what is, whatever, but yeah, I think it's worth the opportunity. And the other thing is because he's still very young player, and when you go from being drafted very early, second pick in the draft, I think by the Lakers,
yeah.
and then all you do is lose, and then LeBron comes in, and all LeBron does is want to blame you for not being good, or you and your teammates, and then they move you out. Now you go to a Pelican situation where it's kind of the same thing. Like you're on a losing team, then Zion comes in, and now the expectations are different, but you're still not able. This was their best season, and still they were disappointments. Like at the end of the day, right? I think they were looked at as a team that could possibly do some stuff, and then they lose out, and they essentially a disappointment. So I think a change of scenery for someone like him,
Sure.
And look, you can probably do that with a lot of young players, which is why I also like Brian's DeJounte Murray idea, because DeJounte Murray has played in the post Kawhi San Antonio Spurs era. He's played probably an ill fit next to Trae Young. So could he be a much better player in a better situation? I think you could probably say that for just about anybody. But this is why I liked this question, because it kind of creates discussion on who actually fits with the Warriors at the same time. And going back to what you said about Jared Allen, now you got two guys who, now you have to have three shooters no matter what playing with those two guys. So
I feel
very
like this
interesting
conversation.
stuff.
It's a fun conversation, but also like a sad and a humbling conversation, because we used to be
none
talking
of
about
these
Kevin
things-
Durant.
Depressing. It's really just the conversations we used to have were how many more championships can they win? And now we're really like, hey, you think we can get Lowry marketing like DeJounte Murray? Jesus, help us.
Well, remember when that second apron thing came out, they're like,
it was an anti-Warriors rule.
yeah,
basically.
we're
Clippers.
stopping this stuff
Yeah.
of happening, of being able to get three high dollar players. And so now I think the idea is you spread out. Instead of having three on a team, you have to, maybe it's two or even one in some cases. And yeah, it's got to be much harder. Like Mike Dunleavy probably comes into this job and goes, God, Bob Myers had it so easy compared to me, and compared to with the money he was able to spend. And now
no expectations for good old Bob,
and imagine
that's why he's with the
Lakeup.
Commanders now.
Well, imagine Lakeup, right? Lakeup's probably on his ass, just being like, Bob Myers could do this.
I want to see Dunleavy's phone and just how many unread text messages he has from Joe. It's probably it's probably muted because he's like, I will catch up with this at 9 p.m. after I've done everything else I need to do.
Yeah.
And it's just rants from Joe, just in paragraph form. Like a relationship you see on Twitter. Like, this is what
I was at the Pink concert at Chase over the summer, and Joe Lakeup was he's like 3 or 4 rows in front of me, and he's just texting. So I did the thing on my phone where I zoomed in as like humanly possible to see if I could see who he was texting, but I couldn't figure it out.
Might have been Pink.
Maybe.
So yeah,
like, come on, that's not the song.
Do a different
that's not my favorite song. All right. So I think we're good here. That was a good full hour. Brian and I, we've been, ever since the playoffs started and the Warrior season ended, we've been going a little shorter. So I liked having more than one topic here. That was a lot of fun. Ben, I think people realize what you do for the Ringer, but quickly, what podcasts, what stuff do you want people to check out on your network there?
Yeah, check out everything on the Ringer NBA show. Real Ones, group chat,
and there's a new YouTube. There's a new YouTube thing going.
We're doing
on
some YouTube. Yeah, check out Ringer NBA on YouTube. We're going live after a lot of big games. We were supposed to go live tomorrow, Friday night, but the Eastern Conference Finals ended very early. So I believe the next time we're going live is next week after Game 1 of the finals. So look out for that. But obviously everything else we're doing on the NBA side, Mismatch with KOC and Verno, Off Guard with Austin Rivers and Pasha. Austin Rivers also just had a fantastic interview with Ryan Russillo today on the Russillo pod, which I hear Austin talk all the time. Today he was locked in. which was awesome. And yeah, if you're listening to this and you're also a wrestling fan, I'm also one of the co-hosts on the Ring of Wrestling Worldwide on Tuesdays, and we have the Masked Man show as well. So go check us out. We're doing some stuff over there.
Austin is very thoughtful, but at the same time, like very honest. Like it's this weird combination of where I kind of wonder, like, how many texts he gets after shows, But he's on the Rudy Gobert Island almost by himself these days.
Well,
right?
Rudy Gobert is a friend of Off Guard. We did an in-person recording with Rudy. So we were probably one of the only shows on Rudy Gobert.
I mean, you can tell he likes him, right?
Oh yeah, they were
really
teammates.
They
were teammates last year, so it makes complete sense. And Austin, I'll just say this: Austin knows hoop, man. I mean, we've talked to him off show about just his thoughts on basketball, and as much as we all know basketball and love basketball. Look, I know this dude caught a lot of heat over the last couple of weeks because of the NFL NBA player comparison thing, but this dude just knows hoop more than 99% of us will even dream about knowing.
We never got the show with him and his dad because then his dad took
the job. Yeah, it's maybe in the off season we'll see if we can get the coach of the Bucks on to talk with Austin Rivers. But it's I'll say this. This is, probably a lot of Warriors fans listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
As a Warrior fan myself, I had a lot of preconceived notions about who Austin Rivers was just because of all the battles that he's honestly had with the Warriors, the way that he was, if we're being real, just one of the best defenders on Steph, period. He's just one of those guys that Steph always had trouble with. I had this preconceived notion of who he was, and getting to work with him, over the past year and change or whatever it's been, the dude just knows what he's talking about. That's the best way I can simplify it and my best pitch to go listen to it. I know there's a lot now of NBA player pods. I discovered today that Thanasis Antetokounmpo has a pod called Thanalysis.
That's amazing.
That name's off the board for anyone who's thinking about it. But for NBA player pod wise, again, I might be biased because I work with them, but Off Guard with Pasha Hagigi, who's one of his best friends. These guys just know hoop, man, and you just come tap in.
Brian, I know the BAM. You guys redid your logo, but I mean, you guys are still recording. I haven't heard you talk about the BAM in a little while.
Yeah, I feel like I've just kind of been. It's been a little dormant. It's like it's a little dormant volcano, but we're ready. We're ready to get back into it and keep it moving. So, not as many updates, but yeah, I've actually been plotting in a way. So,
I mean, with that sweet new mascot logo that you have, I feel like, the social media stuff you guys can really pop at that stuff if you have the time. Just the new mascot logo and the way that you guys can actually clip stuff. But as someone who just has kind of bought into the idea that I need to do more reels and shorts, it's not, if you get in a good rhythm, you could do one in about 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but it's, that's also time you could be doing other stuff. And so I understand that aspect of it. But yeah, you guys got the little cool mascot. I want to see more of that little guy running around the internet.
Yeah.
Are we gonna own the Valkyries corner on BAM or on here? Is that the
Brian that's the goal, right?
Brian already has a Twitter account. What is it called again?
Valk Valley.
Valk Valley.
Talk about dormant. That's like one follower posted once at the block party. That's one where I have to put time into to see.
Well, guess what? You're gonna have
a Warriors world.
You're gonna have two right after this because I'm going to follow the shit out of that.
Well, you know what? You gotta do logo. You kind of gotta get it up, but you have a whole year to get it started. Grassroots. You got to do it pretty soon, though.
Yeah, I saw a Warriors news guy right when the Valkyries was announced. He's like, Valkyries news. I'm taking it. Shameless, man. Let someone else do it.
It's so smart.
No, it totally is. It totally is. I think we were talking in our chat months ago of hey, social media handles, we should try to see if we can find the alliteration for like Warriors World for Valkyries, or see if Valkyrie's Muse is there. Like all the ones I wanted were taken. Valkyrie's Muse was taken. I now know by who.
Yeah.
And so no, that I think I had to do a little shorter version. I couldn't do Valkyries. I just went with Valley. Kind of how I'm thinking with like, the shorter version is going to be the Valks, so not necessarily Valk.
Yeah.
But we have Dub Nation, not Dubs Nation. So
Sure.
maybe there's something there. We'll see.
Yeah, and if anybody knows somebody who wants to do some Valkyries podcast stuff, like Brian and I think we'll probably talk about them on this show for sure. But I would love to support a Valkyries podcast when it actually gets going. Bring some, let's bring a female human on this network. That would be a lot of fun to talk about WNBA. So if there's anybody out there, Ben, if you know, Bri, if you know, I'm going to probably kind of dig around and do a little bit of Twitter scouting to see if people are interested. Because, these days, back in the day when Ben and I got started, it was kind of a lot of work to get a podcast started. And now we kind of have like the blueprint on how to do it. So it's really not that hard to kind of get it going. So if anybody is interested, I'm interested in folks who want to do stuff. So, all right, that is it from here for Ben Cruz at Cruise Control on Twitter. For Brian, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.